Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster. How many people here have trouble figuring out what to speak about? I see a few hands. Sometimes it's easy. Take a level two speech, for example. Understanding your communication style. You speak about your communication style, but frequently the assignment is speak about any topic. What do you do? Tonight, it's morning for me, I'm going to explain how to choose a topic. There are two sources of topics. One source, which you'll see in a second, is personal experience. And what is personal experience? Interests. Do you have something you're interested in that you could talk about? Perhaps it's baking challah. When I was at a meeting here before, I learned how to braid 6 strands of challah. Mine didn't turn out nearly as pretty. Maybe you're interested in solving Rubik's cubes. You could speak about how to solve the cube. I'd like to learn how to solve it. I happen to be interested in music. I have spoken about the importance of giving your child piano lessons, how to choose a piano teacher. I spoke about a comparison of music of Bach, Schoenberg, and Blackwood. I have another interest, Toastmasters. Somebody once commented that all my speeches were about Toastmasters. I combined those two. I had a speech that began with a clip from an opera and then morphed into why you need to have a speech ready at all times. So your interest can be a wealth of sources. And then there's your career. My very first ever icebreaker was about the job that I had. It was called Living the Dream because at that time it was a wonderful job. But it was also the source of a speech about giving unsolicited advice. Don't do it. When I said I was taking that job, so many people tried to talk me out of it. It's a terrible company. You're not going to enjoy it. They treat their employees so badly. It ended up being one of the best jobs I ever had. So maybe listening to unsolicited advice isn't so good. And maybe giving unsolicited advice is even worse. And then there's family. I don't have any family. My parents are gone. I'm not married. I have no children. I'm an only child. But for those of you with family, there are all kinds of stories that could turn into a speech. From what I understand, people who have siblings have conflicts from time to time. There's a good topic for a speech. And of course, children are so wonderful for speeches and grandchildren too. And then there's education. I don't just mean university education. My first day of kindergarten, I will never forget this. We were sitting on the floor in a circle, and the teacher gave us several different balls, and she told us, roll the ball to your neighbor. I panicked. I didn't know what to do. I was in public school. All my neighbors went to Catholic school. Who was I going to roll the ball to? I eventually figured out by neighbor, she meant somebody sitting near me in the circle. But it's a good way to learn that you have to be very clear when you're communicating. She said neighbor, it meant something totally different than what I thought she meant. Word choice is important. It's a good topic for a speech. But in addition to personal experience, there's also reference material, websites and books, and I'm putting the two of those together. I enjoy reading detective novels, and I was reading one time, and the villain in the story was part of a group of eugenicists. And in the book, it was a novel, but it mentioned Buck versus Bell. Interesting. I went to a website and I checked out Buck versus Bell. What was that? It was a landmark case in the United States. And it led me on a journey where I discovered that in certain parts of the United States, eugenics was being practiced all the way into the 1970s. I had no idea. And it was, in fact, the eugenics movement in the United States that inspired somebody as infamous as Adolf Hitler. I learned a lot, but it gave me a topic for a speech. In another novel, there was a character who wanted to be frozen after he died. That was interesting. I went to another website. I found the website for a company in Arizona that freezes people, and it explained the whole process. That was another speech. Great topic. I learned so much about how people are frozen after they're dead. So far, we haven't figured out how to thaw them out. But just reading a novel can give you a topic for a speech. And browsing websites, you can get lost going from website to website. And then, of course, magazines and newspaper articles. You might see an article about somebody who just found a cure for some dread disease. That could be an interesting topic for a speech. Or maybe there's an article about the mild-mannered person who lives next door, who turned out to be a serial killer. That could be another topic for a speech. There are all kinds of topics out there. You just have to keep your eyes open and then make note of it. Now, I don't mean you have to walk around with a pad of paper and a pencil to write everything down. If you have a smartphone, there's probably an app for taking notes. When you get an idea for a speech, make a note of it. Because that way, when you need it, you don't have to think, oh, I had this great idea for a speech. What was it? If you wrote it in your smartphone, you'll have it when you need it. And now that you have the topic, let's narrow it down a little. Think about your audience. Who are you speaking to? How many people are there? You're not going to give the same speech to a group of 1,000 people as you will to a group of five. And what about the age range? Are you speaking to a group of seventh graders? Are you speaking to retirees? Are you speaking to people who work for a particular corporation? And how familiar are they with the subject? If I'm speaking to people about music, am I speaking to a group of musicians or people who know absolutely nothing? Do the people have a similar education, interests, backgrounds, and experiences? How homogeneous is this audience? These are all things you need to take into consideration when choosing a topic. And then what about the occasion? Does the event have a theme? Are you speaking at a bar mitzvah, at a wedding, God forbid, at a funeral? Are you speaking at a Toastmasters meeting? Are you speaking at a recruiting event for some organization? Are you speaking at a sales meeting? Wherever you're speaking, that's going to determine part of your topic selection. And when are you scheduled to speak? Are you speaking at a banquet before the food is served? After the food is served? Are you the first person to speak or are you the last? I'm sure we've all heard the story about the man who was in a long line of speakers, and by the time he got up to speak, almost everybody had left. And when he finished, there was only one person still there. And he thanked the man. He said, "Why did you stay so long?" He said, "Because I'm the last speaker." You don't want to be the person who's speaking to only the person who's coming after you. So pay attention to when you're scheduled to speak. Are the people going to be tired? Are they going to be hungry? All things to take into consideration. And what will happen after your speech? Are people going to be served dinner? Are they going to be wanting to go home? Are they going to have some kind of event that they're going to be taking part in? And then think about your own abilities, your enthusiasm, and your interest. If I'm going to talk about music, I'm enthusiastic and I have a lot of interest, but I'm not an expert. I majored in music, but I am not a musicologist by any stretch of the imagination. Still, I probably know more than most of the people I'm speaking to, unless it's a group of musicians. Then I could be embarrassed. I'm not an authority, not on music anyway. I kind of pride myself on the fact that I am an authority on pathways. So if you need anybody to talk about pathways, I'm your woman. And be specific. Is the topic specific enough for the time allotted? I can tell you, I'm going to speak about music. Well, that covers thousands of years. How am I going to speak about music in 5 to 7 minutes? And what about the subpoints? Do they support the topic? Do they add to my speech? And what can be cut from the body of my speech? There was one speech that I did as, in fact, as a contest speech. And I'll never forget when I started working on the speech, there was a part of the speech where I said, I called and left a voicemail. She called me back and left a voicemail. Then I called her back and left a voicemail. Then she called me back and left a voicemail. And then I called her back, and this time I got her. And I realized that didn't serve any purpose. There was no reason for me to talk about the back and forth of the voicemails. And I changed that part of the speech to, I called and spoke to the woman in charge of the program. That's all I needed. There's usually something that can be cut. In level one, we have writing a speech with purpose. That is, as far as I'm concerned, the most important project in the whole Pathways program. Always be aware of your purpose. Is what you're saying working you toward that purpose? If not, cut it from your speech. Finally, we have personal experience, we have resources, and we have consideration of the audience. And when we put all those together, we end up with an excellent speech topic. Back to you, Mr. Toastmaster.